Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer. Say, once upon a time, an American dog, a Polish dog, and a Soviet dog were sitting around talking. And the American dog said, "In my country, if you bark long enough, eventually you'll get some meat." The Polish dog said, "What's meat?" The Soviet dog said, "What's bark?" Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at 1941 Race to Moscow from Phalanx Games. Hello everybody, we'll get back to the review in just a second. I just want to take a moment to ask you to go ahead and check out and subscribe to my other channel, that is Cody Carlson PhD, where we talk about military history and books on history and fun things like that. Please check that out, please subscribe, and now, back to the review. In 1941 Race to Moscow, 1 to 3 players take on the role of German Army Group commanders during Operation Barbarossa. This was the invasion of the Soviet Union. Players are going to go ahead, they're going to take their Army Group cards. I think Center and South have 4 armies. The Army Group North only has 3 armies. But there's kind of different combinations there. For instance, Army Group Center has 2 Panzer armies and 2 infantry armies, where the others only have 1 Panzer army each. They're going to go ahead, they're going to, as I say, claim the resources. They're going to put on each of their cards. They're going to get a logistics card where they can put trains and trucks, and they're also going to grab their own colored tokens. Additionally, players will grab their own set of pursuit cards. Players are also going to place the Soviet cards near the board and the OKH cards near the board as well, laying out several of those cards that players can purchase during the game. Now, the game board itself is a map of Eastern Europe through Poland into Russia. You have 3 objective cities that are the objectives for each of the army groups. For Army Group North, it's Leningrad. Army Group Center, it is Moscow. And Army Group South, it is Rostov. Now, on his turn, a player can go ahead and move his army from one spot to another spot, only if it shares the same color. So, an Army Group North couldn't go into an Army Group Center area, except there are a few along the border that have colors for both of them that they both could theoretically go to and claim for their own. Now, as a player moves into a space with a Soviet token, you must draw a Soviet card. This represents a Soviet army, a Soviet formation that is fighting back. Well, it's going to say exactly how much, how many resources you have to expend in order to defeat that army. So you can go ahead, you can expend those resources to defeat that army, and then if you are like a panzer, you can keep spending resources in order to move even further. Now, at times, players will enter spaces that don't have Soviet tokens. When they do that, they just have to draw one of their pursuit cards. Now, their pursuit cards, sometimes there's just kind of a lot of headlines. It's a lot of kind of events that are going on that don't really have gameplay, affect gameplay at all. They're just kind of thematic. But occasionally there will be obstacles, there will be things they have to overcome, and again, they may have to pay some resources in order to get past them. If ever they go to a fortified spot, they would have to spend 1 ammunition to get through that. Now, as players are going forward, they're also dropping their colored tokens to denote that they've been there and they can move through there. Now, in addition to moving and fighting, players can also do other things during this turn. They can go ahead and claim trains and trucks from kind of the stock. They can go ahead, they can put them on the logistics card, or they can go ahead and put trains and trucks from the logistics cards onto the board. Now, you can put one train on every kind of pathway between the spaces, and you can put one truck alongside it. You can't have more than one train, you can't have more than one truck, but you can have a truck and a train. Now, typically, the trains can move 6 resources and trucks can move 4 resources. Now, the resources here, of course, are food, ammunition, and fuel. These are the 3 things that you're trying to get to your armies as they advance further into Russia. Now, the trains can only operate, however, if the token you've placed is flipped over so that it has the rail line symbol. If it has the rail line symbol, you can ship stuff right through it, and you can keep moving stuff further and further toward the front lines. Now, there are some other actions you can do. The Army Group North has a naval unit that they can move up the Baltic Sea to kind of help encircle Soviet armies. You can use air support. You can do recon actions. I'm not going to get into too much of those right now, but I will say you can buy, as I say, an OKH card. Oberkommandeur der Heers, High Command of the Army. These are cards that you can play from your hand that give you special abilities and let you do some kind of fun and interesting things, maybe sometimes play dirty tricks on the other Army Group commanders. Now, as I say, you want the tokens you drop to be on the rail side, but you drop them normal, but at the end of your turn you can pick one of them to flip over to its rail side to make it easier to transport goods. Next, you have the Soviet reaction phase. The Soviets can either counterattack or they can essentially place one of their markers on the board out from their objective cities. They're placing them further and out, so the closer you get, the more armies you're going to have to go through to get to your objective. As you're going to, you may be forced to halt an army through various card effects, in which place you put a halt marker there. That means that army isn't going anywhere until you can get it supplied. Now, as you are taking trains from the transport stocks, if you take the last one, essentially that triggers theater reorganization. At that point, you're going to go ahead, you're going to get all of your trains and trucks, take them back off the board, redistribute them. You're going to remove any halt markers, generally just do some cleanup in anticipation of your continuing drive toward those victory cities. Now, at the beginning of the game, you're going to place some Soviet markers off to the side. You're going to go ahead and cycle through markers throughout the game, but at some point, eventually, you're going to run out of Soviet markers. If you do, that triggers the end game, you finish up the round, and then you go to final scoring. Players are actually going to win the game in one of 2 ways. If ever any player reaches their victory city, again, that is Leningrad for Army Group North, Moscow for Army Group Center, and Rostov for Army Group South, if they take that city, it is an instant victory. However, if you've triggered the end game, you play to the end, whoever has the most medals wins. Now, players win medals from winning battles. When you fight the enemy, they'll give you cards that have medals on them when you're successful. But also, too, the cities themselves are worth medals. If you go into there, you get little medal markers. So you're going to actually get the markers, the tokens, and add those up, then add up any of the tokens you have on your cards. And whoever has the most medals wins! 1941, Race to Moscow. So 1941, Race to Moscow. Several years ago, they came out with 1944, Race to the Rhine. And I never played it, but I heard nothing but good things about that game. And I thought, that sounded good. And again, both that game and this game are games that deal with logistics. And I thought, that's so interesting, And because, having written a dissertation about the Second World War, and you realize just how important logistics was. You couldn't do anything if you didn't have the supplies and the equipment and what have you in that war. It's just, I find it fascinating. So I was really looking forward to playing 1941 Race to Moscow. I thought that sounds like a lot of fun. A few weeks ago, I played and reviewed Quartermaster General 1914. Now, that was a game that dealt with logistics in a very different way, and it was more kind of on the strategic level of war. And this is logistics on the operational level of war, keeping your armies moving, maneuvering, going forward. It's a very interesting way. It's a very interesting way that this happens. It's very interesting because you've got, as I say, ammunition, you've got food, you've got fuel, and these things are just the lifeblood of your army. So you're constantly trying to move them forward, but you get choke points, and you can only move these supplies so far forward before you can't move them anymore, and that doesn't help your army. You've got to get them to your army. So you're trying to build these kind of solid routes, but again, when you place these things to move them, you can really only just move the stuff that time, and then you got to wait for theater reorganization. So it's tough. It's deceptively tough. And it leads, of course, to great choices. Now, there's a ton more of the rules that I just kind of glossed over. There's a lot more going on here. This is a deeply strategic game, and it's not like an uber complex game, but there is a level of complexity here. So all this stuff put together makes this a really interesting puzzle. This game is fundamentally a Euro game in the disguise, in the veneer of a war game. This is not a war game. This is very much a Euro, but it's such an interesting Euro. I mean, you know me, I prefer the Ameritrash to the Euros, but this one's got such a strong theme and an interesting idea, and I really like the way it all balances and it all works out together. Now, one thing I do want to talk about briefly, I've played, you know, tons of war games and World War II games, and games with unsavory peoples and factions, you know, what have you, and I've played, like I say, no shortage of games where I was the Germans in World War II. And I don't know. I'm a historian, and I understand what happened, and I don't blink from that. But here, I don't know. Playing the Germans in Russia, there was a lot more going on here that you're not getting from this game. That is to say, the myth of the clean Wehrmacht. It looks just you don't get a real sense of the level of the atrocities that were going on here in Russia. And I don't fault the game designers. I'm not saying this is something they needed to include here, but it's just something I was keenly aware of. And I would hate to think somebody played this game coming away from it thinking, well, it's the Germans against the dirty communists, you know, and they were the Nazis and the communists were both dirty. That's just something that I was thinking about when I was playing this game, and I just hope if people are interested in this, they read reputable historians and their accounts of what happened here. I highly recommend Ronald Smeltzer and Edward Davies' Myth of the Eastern Front. I actually studied under both of those professors at the University of Utah years ago. Brilliant guys, and it's a great book. And there's a lot of people that don't like it because they're still invested in that idea of the myth of the clean Wehrmacht. Anyway, that's something else entirely. What I'm saying here is I think this is a really, really good game. I really like 1941 Race to Moscow. I think it's, like I say, it's a complex Euro game. Not uber complex, but plenty complex. But it's a great puzzle. They did a fantastic job taking that theme and then infusing it with these mechanics. So really good. Recommendation for the discriminating gamer for 1941 Race to Moscow. Buy it. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We'd ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. I'd also ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to please check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about military history and books on history and fun things like that. In fact, I've got a review up there for The Myth of the Eastern Front by Ron Smeltzer and Edward Davies. And I'd also ask you to please give a thumb to this video on Board Game Geek. You know, ladies and gentlemen, one day in Soviet Moscow, a man walks into a shop and he says, "You don't have any meat?" And the clerk said, "No, we don't have any fish. The shop that doesn't have any meat is across the street." Please somebody help me on my feet again, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band.
Characters. I'm going to be the red team. Okay. The red team. Which actually, an interesting little fact, they weren't able to use that name. They wanted to call this red team because of red team in Star Wars. They weren't able to use that. So this is the Crimson League is what this is.